another episode of Recruiting Masters brought to you by the CFC Insider. I'm here with Jim, Gord. We're going to take a quick look at high school football from across Canada. We're going to introduce you to the players of the week. Then we're going to move along. We're going to talk about the CFC50 list. You can find it at CanadaFootballChat.com. We're going to explain that. We're going to explain how it's populated, whom it's populated by. And then we're going to move on to the Recruiting Masters, where we're going to talk about what camps you should attend, NCAA camps, how you should structure that, so on and so forth. So jumping right into it, we're going to look at the high school players of the week. The offensive player of the week is from Quebec, and he is currently a CFC 100 on the 219 list. Quarterback from Curien-Labelle, the Wolves. His name is Xavier Tremblay. This last week he went 22 for 39, 301 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also had 4 carries for 31 yards. I saw him play in the Canada Cup. He's put on a lot of size. He looks good. He's starting to get his team back on the track.
Is he going to be committed to being a quarterback, or is he going to ship like an athlete somewhere else? Because there's always the question about quarterbacks coming out of CJEP with 4 downs in CJEP about their development path. And we've seen how they've been kind of slow to react, with the exception of Hugo Richard, when they get into the RSEQ. So what is his path?
His path, well, right now, he's like 5'11", like 180 pounds. He was smaller last year in his sophomore year, or his Sec 4 year, but he's really filled out, and he has like prolific numbers over his juvenile career. He took a step back this year. I don't know if it was injury-based or if it was talent, entire team-based, but I see him like, he reminded me last year of Benoit Group. Like short, stocky, wasn't as thick as Ben. Ben's thick. Brent got really thick. But I mean, he was that type of player. That's what he reminds me of. Short, stocky kid who can throw the ball and is a gamer.
Kind of like Matthew Bertrand, or could he turn into that guy to play quarterback through university and maybe turn into an 8?
No, he's not that type of player. He's straight up a quarterback. He'll stay as a pivot. He'll move on at that level. I'm not sure what CJIP he's going to go to. We haven't talked to him yet. But I mean, he's straight up a quarterback. Matthew Bertrand could have played fullback, linebacker. I mean, he was just, aside from being an athlete and a great quarterback, he was also very impressive.
If I were Sherbrooke, I'd be sending this kid stuff over.
Yeah. Why wait for him to go to the CJEP, get him into a program and try to develop him? Maybe throw some money at him. I mean, honestly, what else are you going to do at this point? I mean, any of the schools in the US are doing something like that. I don't know how frankly he is, whether he wants to be purely committing to that. I mean, I know that Bill and Cordia have been known every now and then for Franklin to get into the program and be a key part of their program too. So I mean, we were talking on our show last week about how I don't see where the non-Laval Montreal teams in the RCQ have a path to contention anytime soon. Well, they're going to have to find ways to get creative with these things, because, I mean, it can't go on the way it has been the last couple of years, that's for sure.
Next player we're going to look at is from Winnipeg, Manitoba, linebacker from Oak Park. For those of you who don't know, Oak Park is like a traditional power in that part of the country in Winnipeg. They've fallen on hard times. They're not having a great year. This young man, though, really popped out to me because they were playing St. Paul's, provincial power, and he had 12 tackles, 2 TFLs, and 1 forced fumble. His name is James Broom. And, I mean, I watched part of his film. He's a taller, lankier kid, but he's simply just the fact that it was against St. Paul's, and he's on a team that's struggling, and he did everything humanly possible to try and keep his team in the game, and the score kind of reflected that.
Sounds like a guy that Brian Dobie would be all.
I would assume at this point, I mean, Brian's already jumped out in recruiting. Dobie's already signed 4 CFC 100s, and we're not even up to Christmas yet. I'm assuming if this young man keeps it up the way he's going right now, yeah, for sure, he's a young man that Brian Dobie would like. And Dobie is very lucky this year because he has a wealth of talent in the province in 2019.
I got to be honest, Brian Dobie every year in recruiting is like one of the most interesting coaches to watch. He just finished he always makes his annual Thanksgiving tour to this neck of the woods, comes out and visits all the BC boys. I know he was visiting the Kremler brothers. I think he visited Notre Dame. Did he talk to any of your boys at New West?
Not the last 2 weeks. Nobody wants to talk to us.
Yeah, so
another
welcome
story
to the
for
club,
another
pal.
time.
Welcome to the club. But yeah, he's always really interesting because he's got that wealth of talent to mine for mostly in the greater Winnipeg area, and then he often is very active out here on the West Coast as well. So I always keep an eye out for Brian Dovey in recruiting. It's really interesting to me.
The other thing about development, at least at that level that he does and has been very successful with over the years, maybe not as successful over the last 2 years or so, is taking a player, especially when they're on the edge academically, and sending them out to the BCFC. And there's a couple of kids right now with Valley who are from the Manitoba area. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go back to the Manitoba Bisons. But it's an interesting and unique path to develop, is spending some time in junior football and then stepping up to the U Sports level.
He's made a living off of that. He's made an entire coaching career off of that. He seems to come out here, and we have, 5 junior teams? And he always gets a large part of his six. Okay, so a large part of his roster comes from here, whether it's before they go to junior or whether it's after they go to junior. He does a really good job in BC. Like, I would say most of his roster's from the Winnipeg area.
Yeah.
Or from BC. So, I mean, the way I've heard it best explained by another CIS coach a long time ago was Dobie gets his heart and soul from Winnipeg and Manitoba, and he gets his hands and feet from BC.
But he made a comment to me that if he would have bought a condo out here a few years ago, that he could have recruited better and then sold the thing and retired.
Pretty much. If he could get the down payment in. So.
Well, same is true for all of us. But it's interesting too that he's much more active in the BCFC than he is in the Prairie Football Conference. That has a good quality of football itself, including, I know he's pulled some Winnipeg Rifles, but that's a pretty decent squad in his own backyard, and he tends to pay more attention or at least have more success consistently in the BCFC. And that's no matter where it is. It doesn't matter. Like, it's not like he has a pipeline with the Sun, the Okanagan Sun or something like that. He's pulled Sun, he's pulled Rams, he's pulled West Shore Rebels, he's pulled Vancouver Island Raiders, now some Huskers potentially. I mean, all over the map. He's currently got Kent Hicks and Jamel Wiles, who were both at West Shore. I almost called him Jamal.
My son's name is Jamel.
But he'll go all over the province. There's no rhyme nor reason to that. So very wide range that he spreads.
Let's stay in the Winnipeg area and skip down the list here for a second, Clint.
Okay. What are we looking at?
Austin Boland, because we saw his name last week on this list.
Yes, we did. Last week he was the athlete of the week. We saw his numbers this week, and they're not very different. He had 18 carries for 154 yards, 2 touchdowns. But what really impresses me is his two-way. Like, he's obviously, for the second week in a row, he has 15 tackles. He has 1 forced fumble, 1 INT. Last week I called this young man Winnipeg's version of Eric Weddle, which I'll share a story about later. He did that, and then today I was looking at the WHSFL website, which is the high school website, which does an awesome job with stats and keeping everything up to date. And he's already over the 1,000-yard mark rushing. So I'm pretty sure he's pushed himself into the conversations for the Player of the Year of the province at this point.
Yeah, one of the other things with the WHSFL, I think I got that right, is one of the better covered, he was just talking about the website, one of the better covered high school circuits in the country. Mike Still, another guy who does a really good job with that on social media, is always constantly updating things that are going on around there, and it's really high-level ball. We just talked about it, but Boland, a really good downhill guy from the safety position. He's not your typical Canadian football center fielder, plays 15 yards off the ball and racks up tackles 15 yards downfield. He's a guy that really sticks his nose in, comes down into the box, plays vertical, and as a coach at any level, you like seeing that. Maybe a guy that isn't necessarily a true safety at the next level, more of a halfback type who can stick his nose in the box, or maybe even a Sam. But really like the way that this kid plays on defense.
Let's skip over to Lethbridge. Lethbridge has always been a bit of a puzzle for me as a football market. I've always been surprised that they didn't dive into university or at least have a junior team there. So when you're in high school, it's the end of the line. You got to get out of Lethbridge.
Yeah, pretty much. And right now there's a young man doing that. Defensive end, Isaiah Bagnaw. He's another CFC 100. He's like in the top 10. He's got 7 NCAA offers at this point. And if you get a chance to throw on the film of him at LCI, you'll see exactly why. He's 6'5". He's 235 pounds. He runs like a deer. He does everything.
Who's his NFL comparable, Clint?
Who's his NFL comparable? Probably, who's the rush end from not Khalil Mack, the other guy on the Bears?
The other guy on the Bears, I don't know.
Tall, lanky kid. Anyways, the name escapes right now. I can't stick
We'll post it on Facebook later.
We'll post on Facebook. But, I mean, he is tall and he is long. He can turn the corner. And like I said, last week he had 5 tackles, 3 TFLs, 2.5 sacks. And the kid, he's already got 7 offers, and I think he most recently got an offer from Boise State. So he is one of the top defensive ends on the CFC 100. Whether he's 2020 or 2019, he's one of the top defensive ends, period.
Always impressive when you're coming from not a traditional football hotbed in this country to gain the attention of the Division I schools down south. That usually speaks to how legit the kid is. And I know we're going to talk about the camp circuit later. Obviously, there's some help available in that circuit. I don't know how active Isaiah's been on that circuit, but that helps you get your exposure too. And then in the technological age, there's lots of tools out there to get the word out for sure. But coming out of the Lethbridge area, again, like I said, not a hotbed for football in this country. And then when you consider that to most American schools, this whole country isn't a hotbed for football. Pretty impressive to have a long list of offers.
Then again, not too far away from Lethbridge, maybe an hour and a half or 2-hour drive, is Raymond, Alberta, which has kind of sent a signal out that it is a mini football hotbed. So, one of the Ralph brothers ended up going to Weber State, I believe, out of Raymond. Boise went into Kelowna to get Taylor Loeffler. So it's not totally unheard of that those schools in the States will look into that region and pull players out of there.
Well, and that's Boise's backyard too.
Yeah.
Realistically, I mean, Boise, Idaho is about 5 hours from the Canadian border, and they aren't necessarily a coastal city. They're inland a little bit, so that interior BC, Alberta is their recruiting backyard if they want it.
The thing that Boise used to they'd offer 1 or 2 kids from right across Canada. So I don't know if they had a connection on staff or what the case was, but they do a really good job, just like the Grizzlies, Montana does. They'll come in, UND will come in. So all those border schools, they do a good job. And my biggest point to that was sometimes they'll look at our list, our CFC 100 list, and they'll ask, do we just look at the top 5 or the top 10 or whatever? I would strongly suggest that you look at the whole list, because this year Kyle Felwich, who is from Vincent Massey in Winnipeg, went down to the UND camp cold and actually got an offer off the single camp alone. So, I mean, they do a good job of recruiting along the border there. Moving along, we're going to look at Grayson Plasinik from NWSS, something positive over the last 2 weeks. Against ND last week, he had 15 carries. He's our athlete of the week. 15 carries for 194 yards and 5 touchdowns. He would have had 6, but he stumbled on the 4-yard line. Anyways,
That sounds very athletic.
I'm not taking shots at any of my kids for like 2 weeks.
I coached Grayson for a couple of years too, which is why I can take some shots at him.
Yeah, so he had a good game. Defensively, he didn't have a lot of tackles, but he had a TFL and he had a quarterback sack. So kudos to Grayson. That was a good game he had 2 weeks ago against Notre Dame, even though we lost on the last play of the game.
Well, and the thing with Grayson's performance on offense in particular is he was filling in for an injury in a spot that he wouldn't normally start in, and puts up video game numbers in that game at the halfback spot where he was originally a backup. So great performance. He's only in grade 11 right now, and also qualifies as a bit of a surprise performance, at least on the offensive side of the ball. So, a great job by him stepping into a new spot and immediately putting up.
Staying in BC, I see a McDonald from South Delta, so I'm sure that they've already got a room ready for him in Calgary.
I'm not sure. You guys were talking about this. I know Grant's his older brother. I don't know about the other McDonald. But Ben has been on our radar for 2 years now. He was on it as a slot or an inside receiver. He transitioned to quarterback this last year. He could play DB if you wanted him to. Kid's like a thickly built athlete. Against Vancouver College, he almost single-handedly, well, maybe not single-handedly, brought his team back to beat one of the better teams in the province.
I think they lost by a point, didn't they?
Yeah. At the very end of the game, he was 26 of 47, not great numbers. But he had 250 yards with 2 TD passes, and he had 13 carries for 91 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. So he had close to 400 or 350 yards of offense with 5 touchdowns against one of the top, I would say, high school defenses in the province. So kudos to Ben.
Very good athlete, very intelligent kid. I mean, you said that he started out as a slot back, so that speaks to his athleticism. That's why he's able to put up numbers on the ground as well. And I mean, the ground is not necessarily South Delta. South Delta's offense. The ground is not necessarily where they're looking to attack you. Nope. So to add those numbers on the ground is a good statement to how special he is as an athlete. And I know those McDonald brothers, they know how to hit as well. So certainly a guy that I would say is a lock for the next level for sure, and it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. But he's also playing in a fantastic offensive system at South Delta too for quarterbacks.
How does he compare to Jack and Grant? Because for those of us who've been watching the Canada West, we see who these guys are. How does he compare?
I'll talk to Grant. You can maybe get Jack. I don't know. I've never watched Jack. Grant is an awesome linebacker. I would say he's built like Ben, but like a little taller and a little thicker. Yeah. When I watched Grant, it was he popped out to me as a linebacker, an inside linebacker. And basically, I know the people in the scouting bureau called him down and dirty because of the way he played the game. Yeah. Ben's not like that. I would say Ben is more well-rounded. He could be an outstanding safety. He could be an outstanding athlete. Ben had a game against us last year in the provincial semis where he kept them in the game with Calvert. Yeah. So, I mean, I would say Ben's a little more skilled. Grant's a lot more physical and a little more down and dirty.
Grant had stats at Maine. He could have stuck there if he chose to. Is the NCAA a path here for him?
I would say Ben's that type of athlete. The only thing that I would have to check the box with is I've never seen Ben. I've seen Ben run a 40 and maybe see him run that one more time and maybe see a couple of other things. But Ben has those numbers. He actually looks the part. He ran the part. He could play a variety of positions. So, yeah, I see Ben as maybe an NCAA-type safety.
Well, maybe somewhere a little closer to home might turn out to be a better fit for him. I'm going to guess that the culture transition going all the way over to Maine may have played a part in Grant coming back, although that's pure speculation on my part. As you talked about, Jack more along the lines of Ben, a little bit smaller than Grant, a little bit more of a finesse guy. Certainly not afraid to stick his nose in there, but I would say Ben's a little bit more along those lines than Grant.
So could he be a quarterback or could he be an inside receiver then, if you're making the comparison?
Well, it depends on what level you're talking about him playing at. If he stays in U Sports, he can pretty much play wherever he wants. If he's going down south, he's not going to be a guy that sticks as a quarterback for a number of reasons, one of which he doesn't have an overwhelming frame. The other one being that the American schools don't necessarily think a whole lot of the development of quarterbacks up here. So he would be a guy that I would say probably switches to receiver if he heads down to the States. If he stays in U Sports, it totally depends on the program. And I'm sure that if he does decide he's going to be a Canada guy, that's probably going to be a factor in his process, is what he thinks he wants to play and where schools are willing to play him and envision him playing.
Although my last count for quarterbacks playing stateside, I think we're up to 5 right now. I think it's fair to say 3 of them are kind of athletic projects.
Yep.
But there are quarterbacks from Canada who are Canadian trained that are finding spots there.
Well, fair enough. You talk about Canadian trained, then I hope you're not like including a Nathan Rourke in that count, because that's not Canadian trained.
No,
right?
it's not.
So, I mean, that's a little different story. But yeah, you talked about the project thing. We've talked about this before. Pretty much at any position, Canadian kids that go down to the States, they're looking at projectables and athleticism. So they feel like they can coach up a raw, unpolished product, no matter how good a quality program we think they're coming from this country. That's how they're viewed in the States. So it doesn't really matter what position they're at. That's kind of the same mentality.
Yep, they're like they want a blank canvas, and usually that's what they're looking for. Moving along, we're going to skip over. We're going to move to our fast riser, running back from Notre Dame Burnaby, Tion Alexander Amour. He ran for.
Is watching this program right now.
Is he
based
really?
on one of the comments I saw.
Anyways, he had an outstanding game 2 weeks ago against NWSS, where he ran hard. And then he followed it up this week against Carson Graham, where he went over the 200-yard mark, scored multiple touchdowns. I think he's pushing like 500 yards over his last 4 games. And seems each week he has gotten a little bit better. We had them reach out to him and say if he has a big game against VC, he'll push his way onto the CFC 100 list. And maybe he'll stop sending out angry tweets. So kudos to Tion. You had a really good 2-week run the last, and hopefully it keeps up. So.
Well, one of the reasons this kid is a riser right now and is kind of coming from off the radar is he's coming off of a knee surgery about a year and a half ago, and is really starting to hit his stride coming back into that Notre Dame program that has had some new life breathed into it in the last couple of years. Once a perennial powerhouse in the greater Vancouver area, they kind of fell off the map for a little bit, and now they're back, got a veteran coaching staff in place, and Tion is one of their centerpieces on offense right now.
Sure he is.
Interesting, too, because it's an offense that is known for Dennis Kelly, the coach, being known as more of a pass-heavy guy. But if you look at his offense, it's power run, wing tee based, and there's lots of good stuff there to get good athletic running backs into space.
Yep, he did a really good job 2 weeks ago. We're going to take some time now. We're going to move to the CFC50. I'll just explain what the CFC50 is. Every year we rank we rank the juniors, the sophomores, and the freshmen as they transition towards senior. But we also rank the top CJIP players. and the top junior college players that we can find who are Canadian down south of the border. So the CFC60 kind of runs alongside maybe kids who are 2 or 3 years older. So we're going to spend a bit of time. We're going to introduce you to some of the top players in CEGEP this year. And we'll start off with 2 young men who have already verbally committed to Syracuse, both CFC60s. Jeffrey Canton-Arcou, linebacker, committed to Syracuse. This young man is like 6'4", 215 pounds, and he runs like a sub 4.6. He walked down to drove down to Syracuse camp, and he got off the bus and ran a ridiculous 40, which basically by end of camp, they signed him. The other young man is Matthew K. Bergeron. If you get a chance, Gord, being an O-line guy, this young man is a baby like Jonathan Ogden. He has everything. He has height, he has length. His arms are huge, his wingspan is huge, and he's got that butt where there's a lot of weight in the quads, so he can actually anchor and do those things that you ask left tackles to do. And he's super athletic. I don't know if you guys want to add in on that. Or...
No, but I'm really looking forward to that Syracuse squad over the next couple of years as they rebrand as the Orange.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. They're doing a good job. They have another offensive lineman, former CFC 100, Patrick Davis, is already at Syracuse. I think he's been moved into guard and doing a good job. Moving along, so those are ones that have already committed to the NCAA. It's not just about the NCAA, but these are some of the kids at the top end of the CFC 60 list. Frederick Antoine, a receiver who now has 6 offers. Temple, Buffalo, Fresno State, Liberty, Kent State, and Ohio. Freddie is ridiculously fast. Yeah. So I'm curious to see where he goes because he's actually been sitting on 1 or 2 of these offers for the last little bit. I'll be really interested to see where he ends up. Moving along, there's a big old defensive tackle who's down at New Mexico Military Institute, which has now become a destination for these CFC 60 kids and some of the CFC 100s. One of the top JUCOs in the United States, Olivier Charles Pierre. I think they call him Big Papi or Big something. Anyways, he's a 6'2", 200 or 340-pound nose. Like he's a true nose. He can anchor, can do all those things. Does a nice little job getting one gap penetration, but he has an offer from Eastern Michigan. The last player that I just want to introduce people to, Patrick Lavoie. He goes to Andre Grissett, which is in Quebec, another CFC 60. He just got an offer from Liberty. We've talked about him like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, we did talk about him a few weeks ago on this program, and a guy who's having a strong season. Andre Grissett having a strong season as well, actually. But Liberty always seems to be very active up north of the border. It seems like there's always a couple Canadians on their radar, so a good offer for him to pick up. Now, do you see him as a guy that slides in as more of an FCS guy than a bowl subdivision guy?
I see Lavoie, I think more offers will come off the Liberty offer. I think Lavoie actually could turn into, I see him as like a right tackle, that kind of road grading, physical. I mean, he's going to have to fill out his frame and probably get super serious about lifting. They
had a recent Canadian offensive lineman come out of Liberty. Was it Hunter Stewart or was it Jacob Ruby came out of Liberty? There was one.
Ruby's out of Richmond. I think it's Hunter Stewart.
Yeah. So they have some experience with Canadians coming down there and transitioning all right to that program.
While we have time here, I just wanted to jump on the New Mexico Military Institute because I had to do the count on it. We got 9 players from Canada.
That's crazy.
that have gone through New Mexico Military Institute. What's the deal there? Because there's obviously a point person, especially in Southern Ontario, that has been working offensive linemen and defensive linemen through there over the last few years, and they've spun off to different Division I schools with scholarships. But there's also receivers now that are finding their way down there.
Well, my question is, you're also a military man. Should the Canadian Armed Forces be recruiting out of there too now, or what?
It'll work for me.
RMC wasn't that good back in the day.
That would be hard to build a roster there. But to answer Jim's question, there just seems to be, they've pushed in and they've started recruiting a couple CEGEP kids here and there. And then there's obviously somebody on staff who's touching base with somebody, or they're getting a hold of the roster, or they're working the CFC 100 on CanadaFootballChat.com, which a lot of schools do now.
Product placement, nice.
Yeah. So, there you go. Anyways, but they do a really good job. There was a couple of kids that started going to Eastern Arizona as well, but now it seems these kids, especially CEGEP kids, are ending up at New Mexico Military. There's another kid, Enoch Maconzo or Enoch.
Maconzo. He's a defensive back from
I love
L'Oreal.
that guy. He's like a strong safety.
Yeah.
Throw on his film. That's like super impressive. So, I mean, there's a lot of good kids. They're starting to heat up. You're going to see all the RSEQ recruiting is going to go nuts before Christmas where Laval will basically go in and handpick their guys, and then Montreal will pick their guys, and then they'll be done by like December, right? And then everybody will be left scrambling around trying to figure out their lives. But you'll see that CJIP list will empty out or fill up really quickly over the next few months.
And then Sherby will do stuff.
Oh, I'm not touching that either.
Yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed for them because they've got a great situation there with their facility. I'm not so sure about their funding base because it seems to shift. It's a community-funded exercise. It would be nice to see them have hope again like they did when Jeremy Doyon-Rock was there.
Well, it would be nice to see that whole area.
Or Chouare, who took them to a final one year.
Well,
right?
it would be nice for that whole area to bounce back at the U Sports level because for the last number of years, it's been the Champlain.
Champlain Cougars.
Yeah, the Champlain Cougars have been the best football team in town.
Yeah, easy.
And so it would be nice if the university teams could maybe keep up suit and breathe some life back into that area at the university level because I know nowadays they're having trouble even keeping any Champlain kids in town. Either those two local schools, those guys are usually heading out to either Quebec City or Montreal for their universities. So
well, CJEP kids are not interested in going to Bishops these days because they're playing in the AUS. I don't know what they do in Bishops anymore to come up with a winning formula there. But that's a discussion for another time. That's for our show, yeah.
Just a quick head scratcher, and then we'll jump into the recruiting tips. There's a young man plays at Andre Grisette, Kevin Maitali. All right, 35 catches, 752 yards, 11 touchdowns so far. I think they got 2 games left. I have no idea, and I've had 2 coaches call me about him, why this young man does not have an offer at this point. He runs routes, runs really good routes. He's built like a running back. He can catch tough inside, run inside. He can stretch it and take it deep, and he can block. So, I mean, you guys have talked about him not endlessly, but enough to know exactly who he is. I have no idea why he's not on that list with those other players with offers at this point.
Fair enough. I don't have anything
to add
to that.
NCAA guys who are watching this, all you U Sports guys know who he is. At some point, hopefully this young man gets an offer because he's one of the better receivers I've seen in CJIP probably in the last 4 or 5 years.
Let's move on to that tip.
Tip. I've got a couple of questions this last week or 2 weeks ago in the email. Parents asking me, should I send my son, my kid down to NCAA camps during the May window or the June window? And they always ask, how should we pick the camps? That's the big question. The best advice I can give to you parents is pick a big camp because there's going to be a ton of small schools there, but be aware that when you go to a big camp, you might be looking at numbers ranging from anywhere from 500 to 1,000 kids. So if you're going to go to the big camp, you better go there ready to actually test and blow up whatever tests they ask you to do. And if you go there, it probably won't be serious until their position coaches offer you an opportunity to do an individual workout. So that's kind of the end state. That's the main effort for you. That's your goal, is to get that individualized workout after you've tested through the roof. And then the flip side is, if you go to the big school, you'll see all the small schools. If you go to the small school, there won't be a lot of schools there, but you'll get a lot of attention. So I would look at those two and try and book them that way. Big one, small one. Big one, small one. I don't know.
The other thing too, you don't need to go to the other corner of the continent to attend a camp. Stick to something regional. The reality is that if you're that much of a stud, the big national schools will find you. But the reality is, as a Canadian going down to the States, it's likely the regional nearby schools that you're more likely to end up with. And to be honest, you're more likely to be comfortable at.
Yep.
So don't, if you're a BC kid, for example, you don't need to go down to Florida to go to the biggest camp in the country. Go to one in Washington State in the Seattle area. There's lots of big camps in that area. And also, don't necessarily completely discount the camps north of the border as well. Try and get at least one in on this side of the border as well, so that you have that in your back pocket as well. Because again, we've talked about this in the past, but as much as everyone thinks they're a Div 1 prospect, for starters, some Div 1 prospects that have the athleticism and maybe should be playing at that level, they slip through the cracks. and others, they just may not be quite at that level based on what the coaches are seeing down there. So, a lot of our themes are don't close doors for yourself. So continue to look at camps north of the border as well, and also don't overload yourself with them. You're not going to get more out of going to 15 camps than you are going to 3 well-selected ones where you can maximize your performance.
And remember, what are you trying to get out of the game, too? You want to play at the highest level possible, but you want to get an education out of the game. So you have to leave every door open in every opportunity in every part of the continent.
Yeah, that New Mexico military college education.
Probably be pretty good. But I'll drop some tips. Get your pens and your pencils out. Okay, when you do the camp circuit, and you do it in the summer or the spring rolling into the summer, be ready to test. So know what they're going to test at the camp. Try and look so you can get that individualized workout with whoever that coach is. Send your film out early, all right? Don't duck competition at the camp. They notice that, okay? That will scare somebody off. Know the positional drills, okay? Not just the positional drills, but know what you're going to do for competitive drills. And finally, don't be afraid to actually go out and search out the coach and introduce yourself. And do that beforehand via email. Get your film to him and say, Coach, what's the possibility of getting an individualized workout or having you assess me while I'm on campus? Because if you go there, you blow up the testing, you do well in the one-on-ones, and you run like a really ridiculous 40, you're going to be on the radar. So those are the big things that you should look at when you go and do the camp circuit.
Advocate for yourself.
Bingo.
Well, what Clint's saying is you have to be your own agent in this case.
Yeah,
seriously,
for sure.
That's what you have to be. You got to get that agent cap on.
Yep. Okay, those tips, that's one of the tips. There's a whole bunch of tips. You can get them on CanadaFootballChat.com and the Recruiting Insiders. That brings our show to an end for this week. Thank you very much for joining us.
Krown Countdown U, cbcsports.ca, Wednesday evenings, and it's also available on CHCH television Thursday night, 11:30 Eastern, right after local sports.